The bartender at Chupique's knows not to talk to me anymore. He just slides the whiskey across the bar when I walk in, keeps them coming until I either pass out or stumble back to my truck. Tonight's a 2-finger night, maybe 3. My hands are shaking again, and it's not from the booze. I'm 43 years old. I retired from the Cane Ridge Police Department 2 years ago with full disability. Post-traumatic stress, they called it. That's the sanitized version they put in the paperwork. The truth is, I saw something in the bayou that broke my mind in half, and I've been trying to drink it back together ever since. A kid walks into the bar, can't be more than 25, wearing a crisp vermilion parish sheriff's uniform. He's got that look they all have when they're fresh out of the academy, eager, clean, still thinks he's going to make a difference. He recognizes me. I can tell by the way his face changes. "Detective Theroux," he asks, sliding onto the stool next to mine. I don't correct him about the title. "That's right. I'm Deputy Landry. I heard about what happened. That case you worked, the missing kids. He's trying to be respectful, but I can hear the curiosity underneath. They all want to know. They all think they can handle the truth." I take a long drink and stare at the bottles behind the bar. "You don't want to hear this story, son?" "I do, actually. I'm working in Cane Ridge now. People still talk about it. About you. About what happened at Trosclair Cemetery." The name hits me like a fist to the gut. Trosclair Cemetery. I haven't said it out loud in months. I order another drink. Then I turn to this kid with his pressed uniform and his hope, and I decide that maybe someone should know what really happened out there. Not the official version, not the story they tell themselves so they can sleep at night. The real story. "All right," I say, "but you're buying." It started in June of 2019. I'd been with Cane Ridge PD for 12 years by then, working my way up from patrol to detective. Cane Ridge isn't much, about 2,400 people spread out across the parish, most of them elderly, most of them poor. The lumber mill closed in 2003, and the town's been dying ever since. Young people leave, old people stay. Nothing much happens except the occasional domestic dispute or meth bust. I'd gotten comfortable with that, comfortable with the quiet. Then Beth Guidry called 911 at 8:30 on a Thursday night, screaming that her daughter was missing. Emma Guidry, 9 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, wearing a pink shirt and denim shorts. Last seen playing in her backyard at dusk, maybe 30 minutes before her mother realized she was gone. The backyard bordered the old Trosclair Cemetery, a sprawling graveyard that dated back to the 1700s, back when this area was still French territory. I took the call with Deputy Travis Fontenot, a local kid I'd known since he was in high school. Good kid, eager. Reminded me of this deputy sitting next to me now, actually. We drove out to the Guidry house with our flashlights and our radios, and I remember thinking it would be simple. Kids wander off all the time in rural Louisiana. They explore the bayou, lose track of time, come home muddy and apologetic. We'd find Emma within an hour, and I'd be home for the 11 o'clock news. But when we got to the cemetery and started searching, I knew something was wrong. The air was wrong. I know how that sounds. But if you've lived in Louisiana your whole life, you know what the air is supposed to feel like in June. Hot, thick, humid enough to drown in. The cemetery that night was cold. Not cool, cold. The kind of cold that comes from deep places, from underground. Travis felt it too. I could see him rubbing his arms as we walked between the graves with our lights cutting through the darkness. Trosclair Cemetery is the kind of place that makes the hair on your neck stand up even in daylight. Half the graves are unmarked. The ones that do have headstones are written in French, the inscriptions worn smooth by centuries of Louisiana weather. Most of the plots are above-ground tombs, stone crypts built up because the water table is too high for traditional burial. The biggest of these is the Arsenault family tomb, a massive structure of white marble that takes up a whole corner of the cemetery. It looks like a miniature cathedral with an iron gate and the family name carved above the entrance. That's where we found Emma's shoe, a small pink sneaker lying in the grass 3 feet from the Arsenault tomb's gate. The gate was open, just slightly, maybe 6 inches. But that iron gate hadn't been opened in decades. I knew that because my grandfather used to be the caretaker here, and he'd told me stories about the old families buried in Trosclair. The Arsenault tomb had been sealed in the 1920s after the last member of the family died. Nobody had any reason to go in there. Travis and I looked at each other. Then we pulled the gate open wider. The hinges screamed. Rust and time and moisture had fused them nearly solid, but we forced it open far enough to shine our lights inside. The tomb was empty except for 3 stone coffins arranged along the walls. They were sealed, their surfaces covered in a film of moisture and mold. The air that came out smelled like earth and standing water and something else, something sweet and rotten that made my stomach turn. No Emma. But there were scratch marks on the inside of the gate. Fresh ones, small hands, desperate, clawing at the iron. We called for backup. Within 2 hours, we had 20 volunteers combing through the cemetery and the surrounding bayou with flashlights and search dogs. The dogs picked up Emma's scent at the tomb, then lost it completely, just vanished, like she'd been lifted into the air. By dawn, we had nothing. No trace of her except that single shoe. I should have gone home to sleep. I'd been up for 20 hours and my wife Therese was calling my cell every hour, begging me to take a break. But I couldn't. Something about this felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. So I went to the station and started pulling old files. That's when I found the pattern. The Cane Ridge Police Department doesn't have great records. Most of the old files are paper, stored in boxes in the basement, and half of them are water damaged or incomplete. But I found what I was looking for in a file box marked 1974. August 1974. A boy named Timothy Broussard, age 8, disappeared near Trosclair Cemetery. Never found. 1 shoe discovered near the Arsenault tomb. I kept digging. September 1989. A girl named Michelle Thibodeau, age 16, vanished while walking home past the cemetery. 1 shoe found. Never seen again. July 2004. A boy named Christopher LeBlanc, age 10. Same location, same single shoe. No body ever recovered. And now Emma Guidry in June 2019. 15 years apart. Every single time. I sat in that basement surrounded by moldy boxes, and my blood went cold. This wasn't random. This was a pattern, and patterns mean purpose. I needed to talk to someone who remembered the old stories, someone who'd lived here long enough to know the truth buried under the official reports. There was only one person who fit that description: Odette Eber. She was 91 years old and lived in a shotgun house on the edge of the bayou, about a mile from the cemetery. Her family had been in Cane Ridge since before Louisiana was a state. If anyone knew the history of Trosclair Cemetery, it would be her. I drove out there that afternoon. The house was falling apart, roof sagging, paint peeling, porch tilted at a dangerous angle. But the yard was full of flowers, and there were religious icons everywhere: crosses, statues of saints, a small shrine to the Virgin Mary. Odette answered the door before I could knock. She was tiny, bent with age, her face a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "I've been expecting someone to come," she said in that thick Cajun accent that sounds like music. "Took you long enough." She let me inside. The house smelled like chicory coffee and old wood. Every surface was covered with crucifixes and rosaries. She sat me down at her kitchen table and poured coffee without asking if I wanted any. "You want to know about the Arsenault family?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded slowly. "Then you better listen close, because I'm only going to tell this once." The Arsenault family, Odette told me, were plantation owners before the Civil War. Wealthy, powerful, cruel in the way wealthy people were cruel back then. The patriarch was a man named Jean-Baptiste Arsenault. But the real power in the family was his wife, Marguerite Arsenault. She was beautiful, Odette said. My great-grandmother saw her once at a party in New Orleans, said she was the most beautiful woman she'd ever seen. But beauty like that, it comes with a price. And Marguerite, she wasn't willing to pay. In 1867, yellow fever came through Louisiana like the hand of God, killed thousands. The Arsenault family lost 3 children in 2 weeks, all their sons, all under the age of 12. Jean-Baptiste became a drunk, but Marguerite became something else. They say she went into the swamp, Odette said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Went looking for something that could bring her babies back, found something else instead. I wanted to interrupt, to ask for clarification, but something in Odette's face stopped me. We call it the rougarou in Louisiana, she continued. The werewolf, the monster in the bayou. But that's just a word we use because we don't have another one. What lives in the deep swamp, detective? It's older than any words we got. Older than French, older than the Indians who were here first. And it makes bargains. According to the story Odette's family had passed down for generations, Marguerite made a deal with something in the swamp. She wanted her youth back, wanted to be young and beautiful forever. And the thing, whatever it was, gave her what she wanted. But 3 days later, Marguerite and Jean-Baptiste were found dead in their plantation house. Dead don't quite describe it, Odette said. They looked like they'd been dead for months. Bodies all dried up, skin like paper, hair white and falling out. The doctor who examined them couldn't explain it. Said it was like they'd aged 50 years in 3 days. The bodies were sealed in the family tomb. The plantation house stood empty for years before burning down in a fire in 1912. But people said you could still hear things at the cemetery. Crying, children crying. And every 15 years, Odette said, looking at me with those sharp old eyes. A child goes missing near that tomb. Been happening for more than 100 years, detective. You think that's a coincidence? I didn't know what to say. The rational part of my brain was screaming that this was folklore, superstition, the kind of story people tell to explain tragedy. But I kept thinking about those scratch marks on the inside of the tomb gate, about Emma's shoe. What does she want with the children? I asked. Odette's face went grim. Same thing she's always wanted. Youth. She takes them and she stays young. That's the bargain. That's what it costs. I left Odette's house with my mind spinning. I didn't believe in monsters. I believed in evidence and procedure and rational explanations. But I couldn't shake the cold feeling in my gut. That feeling got worse when I got the call that evening. Another child was missing. Lucas Prejean, 7 years old, taken from his backyard while his parents were cooking dinner. They'd only looked away for 5 minutes. When they came back outside, Lucas was gone. His backyard bordered Trosclair Cemetery. I drove there with sirens screaming, Travis right behind me. We found Lucas's parents standing in their yard, both of them pale and shaking. The mother was crying so hard she couldn't speak. The father just pointed toward the cemetery. We found Lucas's red jacket lying in the grass 20 feet from the Arsenault tomb. This time, I examined the tomb more carefully. I brought a flashlight and a crowbar, and I looked at every inch of that structure. The stone coffins inside were sealed with mortar that had to be more than a century old, solid, undisturbed. But the floor of the tomb bothered me. It was stone, like the walls, but when I tapped on it with the crowbar, it sounded hollow. Travis and I spent the next hour prying up the stones. Underneath, we found a space, a crude opening leading down into darkness. The edges were rough, recently broken through. Someone had been digging here, recently. We called for backup and equipment. 2 hours later, we had lights and a forensics tech from the parish office, a quiet guy named Paul who'd seen everything. We descended into the space beneath the tomb. It was a tunnel, narrow, walls packed earth and roots, barely tall enough to walk through hunched over. The air was cold and wet, and it smelled like the grave. The tunnel led us about 100 yards before opening into a root cellar. I recognized it immediately. This was underneath where the old Arsenault plantation house used to stand. The house was gone, burned to nothing, but the cellar remained. What we found there made me want to vomit. 6 small wooden chairs arranged in a circle, children's clothes scattered across the floor, a t-shirt with a 1970s band logo, a pair of acid-washed jeans from the 80s, a modern backpack with cartoon characters on it. Emma's other shoe was there, pink, size 4, still tied. Lucas's backpack was leaning against the wall. But no children. Paul was photographing everything, his face pale in the harsh LED lights. Travis was breathing hard beside me. One hand on his gun like that would do any good down here. "There's another tunnel," Paul said quietly. He was right. In the far corner of the cellar, another opening led deeper underground. This one was older, the walls reinforced with ancient cypress wood, the floor worn smooth by time. We followed it. The tunnel went on forever. My sense of direction told me we were heading away from the cemetery, deeper into the bayou, but it was hard to tell in the darkness. The air got colder with every step. Our breath came out in visible clouds. Then the tunnel opened up. We stepped into a cave, a natural limestone chamber that had to be 30 feet high and twice that wide. Our lights couldn't reach the far walls. Somewhere in the darkness, water was dripping. In the center of the cave, lit by our flashlights, was a woman sitting in a chair. She wore a dress from another century, antebellum style, all lace and silk, rotting and stained with moisture and time. Her skin was like paper, stretched tight over bones, covered in liver spots and wrinkles. Her hair was thin and white, hanging limp around a face that might have been beautiful once, but was now a skull covered in skin. But her eyes, God help me, her eyes were young, sharp and clear and aware. Behind her, standing motionless like dolls, were Emma and Lucas. I drew my weapon. "Police, don't move." The words felt ridiculous as soon as they left my mouth. This wasn't a domestic dispute. This wasn't a drug deal gone wrong. This was something else entirely. The woman smiled. Her teeth were brown and broken. "You should not have come here," she said. Her voice was surprisingly strong, with a French accent that sounded like it came from another world. "This is not your place. Let the children go." I kept my gun trained on her, but my hands were shaking. Travis and Paul flanked me on either side, their flashlights creating crazy shadows on the cave walls. She laughed. It sounded like wind through dead trees. "They're already mine. I have been waiting 15 years. Do you know how long 15 years feels when you are old? When every day you feel yourself dying? 15 years is an eternity." Paul swept his flashlight around the cave. I heard him make a choking sound. The walls were lined with bones, small bones, children's skeletons, dozens of them, maybe more. Some were ancient, the bones brown and crumbling. Others looked newer. "Jesus Christ," Travis whispered. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullet didn't hit her. She moved, impossibly fast for someone who looked so old, and suddenly she was standing 5 feet to the left of where she'd been. "Iron and lead cannot harm me," she said. "I'm beyond such things now." Then she moved again, too fast to follow, and grabbed Travis by the throat. I watched my friend die. It happened in seconds. She held him, and Travis aged. His hair went white, his skin wrinkled and sagged, his body withered, bones becoming visible through clothes that suddenly hung loose. He tried to scream but only made a rattling sound. 30 seconds after she touched him, Travis was an ancient corpse, and she dropped him to the cave floor like garbage. She looked younger now. Not much, but noticeable. Some of the wrinkles were gone. Some color had returned to her skin. She turned toward me and Paul. Then Emma screamed. It was high and piercing and full of terror, and it broke whatever spell had been holding her frozen. She bolted toward me, and Lucas followed. Both children suddenly animate again. I didn't think. I grabbed them both and ran. Behind us, the woman screamed, a sound that wasn't human, that resonated in the cave like it might bring the whole thing down. I heard something following us, not footsteps, but a dragging, scraping sound that made my skin crawl. We ran through the tunnel, Emma sobbing, Lucas silent and shaking. Paul was ahead of us, his flashlight bouncing crazily off the walls. I could hear that scraping sound getting closer. We made it to the root cellar. Paul went up first. Then I pushed the children up through the opening, my lungs burning, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I heard her behind me, close, so close I could smell her, earth and rot and something sweet like flowers left too long in a grave. I scrambled up through the opening and into the tomb, dragging myself across the stone floor. Paul pulled me to my feet. We ran out of the tomb and into the cemetery, the children between us. It was dark outside now, full night. The forensics van was parked near the cemetery entrance, driver's door open. Paul wasn't in the van. We found him 50 feet away, collapsed on the ground. He looked 90 years old. I put Emma and Lucas in my truck and drove like hell toward town, checking the rearview mirror every 5 seconds. In the reflection, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the cemetery, watching us go. Even at that distance, even in the dark, I could see her clearly. She looked younger. The next 48 hours were chaos. I brought Emma and Lucas to the hospital. Both were physically unharmed but unresponsive, staring at nothing, not speaking. The doctors ran every test they could think of and found nothing wrong except shock. The state police came. They found Travis's body in the cave. They found Paul's body near the cemetery. Both men had died of what the medical examiner called sudden onset progeria, rapid aging syndrome. Impossible, medically unexplainable. They searched the tunnel system. They found the cave and photographed everything, including the bones. Dozens of children's skeletons, some dating back more than a century, according to the forensic anthropologist. But they didn't find any woman, no body in an antebellum dress, no sign anyone had been living in the cave. The case became national news within a week. House of Horrors, beneath Louisiana Cemetery. Cable news vans parked in Cane Ridge. Reporters everywhere. The FBI got involved. I tried to tell them the truth. I tried to explain what I'd seen, what had happened to Travis and Paul. But my story didn't match the evidence. There was no proof of any woman, no DNA, no fingerprints, no sign of recent habitation in the cave except for the children's belongings. The official conclusion was that a serial killer had operated from the cave for decades, taking children at irregular intervals. The killer had likely died recently or fled when Emma and Lucas were taken, which explained why the children had been left alive. The deaths of Travis Fontenot and Paul Guidry were attributed to exposure to some unknown toxin in the cave, possibly a naturally occurring gas or mineral that caused rapid cellular degeneration. They were lying to themselves. I knew it, but I couldn't prove anything. Emma and Lucas slowly recovered over the following weeks. They were released from the hospital with no memory of their time in the cave. Emma's mother hugged me and cried and thanked me for bringing her daughter home. I smiled, accepted her thanks, and felt like a fraud, because I knew Marguerite Arsenault was still out there. I became obsessed with finding her. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating regular meals. I searched property records, death certificates, anything connected to the Arsenault family. I found Marguerite's grave in the tomb. The stone slab had been pushed aside from underneath, empty. Every night, I drove to Trosclair Cemetery and sat in my truck with my gun in my lap, watching. Therese begged me to stop. Our daughter was 10 years old, and she was frightened of me, the way I looked, the way I acted. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How do you explain to your family that monsters are real? 3 weeks after the incident, I saw her. It was dusk, that golden hour when the light turns everything soft and beautiful. I was parked at the edge of the cemetery, half asleep, when movement caught my eye. A woman stood at the far edge of the graveyard, where it bordered the swamp. She looked 40 now, maybe younger. Brown hair, clear skin, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, like any normal person. But I recognized her eyes. We looked at each other across the cemetery, 100 yards between us. She smiled. Then she turned and walked into the swamp, disappearing between the trees. I ran after her, crashed through the underbrush, mosquitoes swarming, mud sucking at my boots. I searched for an hour until it was too dark to see, but found nothing. She was gone. I reported it the next day, told my captain I'd seen someone matching Marguerite's description. He looked at me with pity and suggested I take medical leave, see someone, talk to a therapist. I refused at first, but then Therese left, taking our daughter to her sister's place in Lafayette. Said she couldn't watch me destroy myself anymore. The department put me on mandatory psychological leave. I spent 3 months seeing a therapist who smiled and nodded and wrote things in a notebook while I tried to explain that I wasn't crazy, that what I had seen was real. They never let me come back to work. Medical retirement with full disability. PTSD, the paperwork said. Everyone was very understanding, very kind, very sure that I'd cracked under the pressure of losing Travis. 6 months after Emma and Lucas were found, I was living alone in a rental house, drinking every night, watching the cemetery from my truck. One night, drunk and desperate, I decided to end it. I bought all the gasoline I could afford and drove to Trosclair Cemetery with a crowbar and a lighter. I went down into the tomb, into the tunnel, into that godforsaken cave. The bones were still there, the wooden chairs, the children's clothes. I poured gasoline over everything and set it on fire. The cave filled with smoke and flames. I used explosives I'd bought illegally to collapse the tunnel behind me as I ran. Brought down tons of earth and stone. I sealed the entrance to the tomb with bags of concrete, mixed it by hand, poured it into the iron gate until everything was solid. Maybe that would hold her, I thought. But I knew it wouldn't. Not forever. I knew the pattern. 15 years. And I knew I'd be watching when the next 15 years came around. The fire didn't kill her. Nothing can. She's still down there somewhere. Or maybe she's already out, walking among us, looking younger every day. I finish my story and order another drink. The young deputy, Landry, he said his name was, is staring at me with wide eyes. He starts, then stops. That's quite a story, detective. You don't believe me, I say. It's not a question. I believe that case would mess anyone up. All those dead kids they found, losing your partner like that. It's understandable that I went crazy. I smile without humor. Yeah, that's what everyone thinks. He shifts uncomfortably on his stool. After a moment, he puts a hand on my shoulder. It's okay, man. Really, you did your best. You saved those 2 kids. That's what matters. He means well. They all do. But none of them understand. Landry leaves after buying me one more drink. I sit alone at the bar, staring at the amber liquid, seeing nothing. My phone buzzes. A news alert. Child missing in Cane Ridge, Louisiana. My blood turns to ice. I open the article with shaking hands. A girl, 6 years old, last seen playing near the old Trosclair Cemetery. One shoe found near the sealed tomb entrance. But it's only been 6 years, not 15. The cycle is accelerating. I read the details 3 times, making sure I'm not imagining it. But it's real. Another child taken. Too soon. The pattern is broken. Or maybe it was never a pattern at all. Maybe she's been taking children all along, secretly, carefully, and the ones I found were just the ones that got noticed. How many children has she stolen from families too poor to make the news? From foster kids and runaways and the forgotten children nobody looks for? The horror of that thought threatens to drown me. I pay my tab and walk out of Chupiquets into the thick Louisiana night. The air is hot and humid, but I'm cold all the way through. I know what I have to do. I get in my truck and drive toward Cane Ridge. The highways are empty this time of night, just me in the darkness and the certainty that I'm driving towards something that will probably kill me. But that's all right. I died 2 years ago anyway, down in that cave. What's walking around now is just the echo. I reach Cane Ridge as the sun is starting to rise, turning the sky pink and gold. The town looks deader than ever. Half the buildings are boarded up. The population sign at the town limit says 1,400 now. I drive straight to Trosclair Cemetery. The concrete I poured over the tomb entrance is broken apart. Something has torn through it like paper. The pieces are scattered across the grass. The iron gate stands open. I park my truck and take out my gun, though I know it won't help. My heart is pounding so hard, I can barely breathe. I descend into the darkness one more time. The tunnel is scorched but passable. The explosive collapse I created has been cleared away. The rocks moved aside, as if they weighed nothing. I follow the familiar path to the root cellar, then into the deeper tunnel. The cave opens before me, and I shine my flashlight into it. She's there, sitting in her chair in the center of the chamber. But she's changed. She looks 30 now, maybe younger. Her hair is thick and brown, her skin smooth. She could be anyone, could walk down any street in any town, and no one would look twice. Around her stand 4 children, not just the missing girl, 3 others too, all standing motionless, eyes glassy. "You came back," she says, and her voice is younger too. Less of that French accent, more modern. Good. I'm still so hungry. I keep my gun trained on her, knowing it's useless. "How many?" I ask. "How many children have you taken?" She smiles. I stopped counting after the first 100 years. The truth hits me like a physical blow. She's been here since the 1860s, taking children continuously. Not every 15 years. That was just the ones that got noticed. How many other children disappeared and nobody cared, nobody investigated? Why children? I demand. Why can't you take adults? "Children have more years to give," she says simply. "A child of 8 gives me 8 years of youth. An adult of 50 gives me less than I need to survive. The math is simple." She stands up from her chair, and even though she looks young, there's something ancient in the way she moves, something that was never human. "You cannot stop me," She says, "You cannot kill me. I will be here long after your dust. I will be here when this town is gone, when the roads have crumbled, when the swamp takes back everything you've built. I will always be here." "I know," I say. Then I pull out the detonator. I spent the last 6 months buying explosives on the black market, spent every penny of my disability checks on dynamite and C4 and DT cord. I've wired the entire cave structure, the tunnel systems, everything. Enough explosives to bring down half the cemetery. "I know I can't kill you," I say, my thumb on the trigger, "but I can bury you. I can put so much rock and earth on top of you that it'll take you 100 years to dig out, maybe more." Her expression changes. For the first time, I see something like fear in those young eyes. "The children will die if you don't let them go." Right now, we stare at each other across the cave. I don't blink. My thumb is firm on the detonator. Finally, she waves her hand. The children stumble, suddenly animate again. They're confused, frightened, but alive and aware. "Run," I tell them. "Out of the tunnel, into the cemetery. Run to the road and don't stop." They run, stumbling in the darkness. I back toward the tunnel entrance, keeping my flashlight and gun on Marguerite. "This won't kill me," she says. "I know, but maybe it'll slow you down." She moves toward me, impossibly fast, but I'm already in the tunnel. I press the detonator. The explosion is enormous, deafening. The world becomes noise and dust and falling rock. The tunnel collapses behind me as I run, the ceiling coming down in chunks the size of cars. I can barely see through the dust and debris. A hand grabs my collar from behind. For a moment, I think it's her, that she caught me, that I'm about to age and die like Travis did. But then I'm being pulled backward, dragged through the collapsing tunnel. It's one of the boys I saved. The oldest one, maybe 10 years old. He came back for me. We barely make it out before the entire section of cemetery collapses. The ground shakes. The arsinoe tomb crumbles inward. A massive sinkhole opens up where the cave system used to be, swallowing headstones and trees and earth. The boy and I collapse on the grass, coughing up dust as the sun rises over Cane Ridge. The other children are safe, standing by my truck. Within minutes, I hear sirens approaching. Someone must have heard the explosion. I lie in the grass, staring up at the pink sky, and know that I've only bought time. She's down there, still alive, trapped under thousands of tons of rock and earth and limestone, but the bayou has deep roots. Water finds its way through everything, and she's patient. She's been patient for more than a century. She'll dig her way out eventually, maybe in another 15 years, maybe longer, but I'll be waiting. That was 2 years ago. I'm telling you this story in Chupiquet's Deputy Landry, but you've already left. I'm talking to my empty glass now, the way I do most nights. After the rescue, after the ambulances and the investigations and the media circus, I used the last of my money to buy a piece of property adjacent to Trosclair Cemetery. It's just an empty lot with a well and electricity hookup. I parked a trailer there. Every night, I sit on the porch with my shotgun across my lap and watch the sinkhole where the cave used to be. Sometimes I see movement down there in the darkness. Sometimes I hear sounds, scratching, digging, the the sound of stone being moved. She's down there, working her way up, patient and hungry and inevitable. The doctors say I'm delusional. My ex-wife says I'm destroying myself. My daughter doesn't talk to me anymore. But I know what I saw. I know what's buried under Cane Ridge. And when she comes back, when, not if, I'll be here. This is my life now, watching, waiting, making sure she stays down there as long as possible, making sure she doesn't take any more children while I'm still breathing. It's not much of a life, but it's the only one I have left. I order another drink and watch the darkness through the bar window. Somewhere out there, deep beneath the Louisiana earth, something ancient stirs in its tomb, counting the years, counting the days, hungry, patient, eternal. And I'll be watching when she finally breaks free, just like I promised myself I would, because somebody has to. Even if nobody believes me, even if everyone thinks I'm crazy, somebody has to watch. I'm Detective Owen Thoreau. I worked a case in rural Louisiana that messed me up for the rest of my life, and I'll be working that case until the day I die.